Hi everyone, welcome back to Scrap Happiness Studio. And before I forget, I want to thank you for subscribing because that encourages me to make more videos. So what I wanted to share with you today is how I made one of my favorite quilts. I think I made this about 15 years ago, and everything really worked out on this quilt, and right down to the quilting. I don't know if you can see in there. I don't know, everything just, it's one of those projects where everything just worked out. So I first learned about this pattern from this same book that we've been working out of, and there's the original quilt, picture of the original quilt, and then here's the pattern that the authors developed. And I had looked at this pattern for a long time, and because the original way they wanted you to make it was to make templates for all these and then sew them together. I knew I didn't want to do that. And I tried to paper piece it, and I realized that was not going to be any fun, especially when I don't know how many blocks are in this quilt, but there's a lot of blocks in here. So then I had on the idea to try to free cut piece it. And that actually worked out really well. So here's the original block. And I think the way that I left my, no, here it is. I think I originally, well, I'll show you how I did it. And here's some samples I did on a much larger scale. I think I started out with to do these, when you look at this pattern, the hard part is the one parts with the little triangles in there. So I started with those, and I started, I think, with taking a 4-inch square and cutting that apart to make these little triangle parts. Today I'm going to demonstrate it with a 4.5-inch square, just to cut myself a little wiggle room. And these ones were done using a 6-inch square to start with. I think I like the scale of the smaller blocks better, but these could be fun. So we start out the way we always start out, and I'm going to cut out, remember, however many pieces of fabric you line up, that's how many blocks you're going to get. Actually, we're going to get double that number of triangles, as we'll see. And unlike in the original pattern, all the triangle units were all done in the same colors. Because I've stacked up red and white fabrics here, we're going to get half of them red triangles in a white background and half white triangles in a red background. And then, well, I should use a ruler here, but I'll just try to wing this. And this block, I have to laugh at myself. Well, I'll show you in a minute, but this block was a confusing block for me to make. I ran into some troubles thinking about this, but I eventually got them sewn together, and you get better with practice, of course. So I'm going to look halfway down the side here. I'm just going to eyeball it and cut across to the half there. So that's cut one, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. And remember, you're going to leave that little bit for seam allowance up there so that your points don't get cut off. And then the same thing down here. I'm going to aim above here and here. And when I sew these together, I've still got my all-purpose foot on here. But if you've got a setup for straight stitch, this would be a good time to get it out, because these are little pieces of fabric here with little seams. Okay, so this was my last cut. So I'm going to sew these guys together first. Oh, that's right. I need to learn how to speed up the tape here. I have not found in my program where to do that. In my editing program. So I don't want to make you wait through all this. But I'm using that same technique that I showed you last time, where I'm going to leave everybody chain pieced together here so they don't get mixed up. Because we're not we're used to looking at squares, I found it a little confusing to look at these triangles. So just like last time, I'm going to leave these hooked together until the very last minute, until I go to sew the next chunks on. So I've got these guys, so let's see here. So that's the thing. So then I'm going to sew all these on. And then I'm going to go and sew all these on. So I will do that, and I will come back after I've done that. I just learned something. I realized you couldn't see the quilt, and that's because I had set up the shot using the photo feature, but the video zooms in more than the camera part. So I just thought I'd add this so that you could see the quilt, a little more of the quilt. And the quilting on the quilt. And you can see that these blocks are imperfect. In fact, this one's particularly imperfect. But I don't think it diminishes the beauty of the quilt at all. Hi, I'm really happy to tell you that sewing these little triangles was easy. It was easy and fast. So I was concerned, which is why I made my sample so big, but it was easy. And so the next step was to determine the size of the square I needed in the center there. And you will notice on here, my points are cut off. But when you were looking at that whole quilt, would you have ever noticed that? No, so I don't worry about that. So what I did is I took a ruler and held these up against the ruler here. And it looks like I need a 5-inch square. So I'm going to cut that. Actually, I only need 2, don't I? Okay, I was thinking about these outside ones, but I just need 2 for this. And then you just sew these guys onto here. I hope I cut those big enough. You could think about cutting them a little bit bigger. But I think it's going to be okay. But if you cut it a little bit bigger, it might give you a little more wiggle room. So that's that initial block, and then we need the triangles that go on the outside. So I'll go back to my giant samples that I made. So you'll notice this block is not lying as flat as it could be, but as my friend Kathy reminded me, I always used to tell people it'll quilt out, which is something that I do hang my hat on frequently, especially with free cut piecing. And I just noticed that I didn't look through here carefully for my triangles on this, but take a look at this block. When I first made these samples, I thought, oh my gosh, these edges are so messy. Look at that. I mean, you couldn't put a square on there and get something square. And I know when I made the original quilt, I did not square up in between. I just sewed them on, and I didn't bother squaring up any of the blocks till I was all done. So, which if you are a traditional piecer, that will be could be very hard for you to accept that. So again, to determine the size of this, of what size of square I'd need to get to cut in half. Oh, I had a ruler out here that, I guess I put it away, but I had a ruler that had that diagonal. Let me go grab one. So I laid a ruler across here. Oh, wait, not across that, across this. To see what size. I know I want at least 1/4 of an inch out there. And here I would say I would do a little extra. So I look out there and I can see that that's a 7-inch square to there. But I would like to have that go out a little more. So I think I would go certainly 7.5, maybe even larger. We're going to trim them to size after we put these triangles on. So if you cut yourself a little extra wiggle room in there, it won't hurt. The worst thing that'll happen is that these points will float in your block. And that's not really a problem. So as I said, I know I didn't even bother trimming these edges as you would have done when you were starting out. So all I did was lay this down on top of here. I didn't worry about getting through that point there because I was more concerned about getting these points under my feet. And I just sewed those. I think then I went opposite, and I would do that for you, except that I've got to go cut another piece since I had that one wrong. So look at this, how this is crazy on this side. But honestly, I don't worry about that till I'm all done. And I just keep sewing these on until I got this. And then at this point is when I'd get before I did any trimming, I would measure all the blocks. Because when you work this way, you might have a block that's considerably smaller. So you'd want to measure your blocks and see who's the smallest. So I'd have to get out my 15-inch block to square these up correctly. And I would just find the smallest one and trim it to that size of square. And when I was fretting about the inaccuracy of this, I laughed at myself because I said, Mary, you're not doing precision piecing. You're not going to get precise stuff. And so I just, and visually, these blocks just have a little bit of wonkiness, which I realize I really like and don't mind. So if you don't mind, then you might enjoy working this way. Okay, thanks so much for joining me. Bye. Oh, I did want to say next time, I think what we'll go into is another class I teach called Fun with 4 and 9 Patches, which is also free cut piecing and is lots of fun. Okay, bye.